All right, everybody. Well, we're a couple days past Christmas of 2024. Merry Christmas. Hope you guys are all doing well. So, but getting to the point of the video, today I have a unique opportunity where I have both camper 8.0 and 9.0, my last two campers, on my property, and we can kind of take a look at them back to back. I hope this might be helpful for some of you guys, but I'm going to go ahead and cover some of the similarities between the two, because 8.0 had a direct influence on a lot of the design characteristics of 9.0, even though they look cosmetically quite different. And then I'll also talk about some of the differences. I'll be talking about some interior finish differences. I'll be talking about some layout changes between the two. And we'll even pop in the van in the latter part, and when I talk about some of the interior finishes, so you guys can kind of get a sense for how different things look. My goal with this video, though, is, particularly a lot of you who watch these are probably building your own or considering building your own or maybe making a second one. The hope is that maybe kind of looking at two campers that are very different in some ways, but also very similar, might give you some insight. Anyways, let's get into it with 8.0, and I'm going to talk about the outside. Okay, so let's talk about an exterior shape, and this is going to define a lot of the similarities between the two campers. So this is camper 8.0, and this is the first camper that I built exactly like this. Now, this is a relatively low profile camper. The interior height is only 61.5 inches. The length of the main body is 77, and the width is 71.5. Those latter two are external measurements. And of course, this is the Cedar sided style, which I have made other campers like this. But the specific unique thing about this is its size, which is intended to be low profile for aerodynamic purposes, but also weight, and this shape. The most characteristic element of it is this sweeping arc on the roof. Now, it leads out into a small cab over, which I did because it kind of helps with the proportionality of the camper. And in this case, the cab over is only storage, which you guys will see on the interior. Let's go ahead and roll in the interior, though. But just when we walk over and look at 9.0, I want you to keep those broad design characteristics in mind. Okay, so here we are, the interior of 8.0. Now, what you guys see here is, like I said, the main bed area is running north-south, and it's within the main cab of this camper. Now, the general size of this is kind of built more or less for a solo traveler, but as a side note, the person purchasing this one wanted a bed extension, which I thought was a pretty good idea. And so I added these rails here and this section here that would sit down in there. And of course, you'd want to add your own foam mattress or something for that section. But one thing I want to make note was this was not in the original design consideration, but it was a good addition, and it will allow a camper like this to really sleep, two people pretty readily. All of the wood in here is unfinished cedar in the sense that it's not stained, but I do have a couple coats of a water-based polyurethane. So this is what this looks like. And later I'm going to walk in the van so you could see the difference between an unfinished cedar, between cedar finished with a water-based polyurethane and cedar finished with a hard wax finish. I use a brand called Osmo, O-S-M-O, and I like that also. So just kind of make note of this. We'll walk to the van before we go to 9.0. But, all right, to the main design considerations in here, though. The bed, about 36 inches wide, north-south. And as you guys can see right here, it angles in to the doorway, meaning that if you were to look at it from here, the bed is actually a little bit wider than the doorway. And I did that to give a little bit more proportionality to the door, so it is centered, it's off center a bit in the rear, but so it's not so much so. And then on the left here, you see a sweeping countertop. The latter two are opening drawers. This is a faux front that can pull off, because we've got some plumbing down here. And then kind of one of my favorite features in that corner there is that secretary desk. And that exterior door there pulls downward and functions as a desk surface. And then, of course, there is storage inside. But this is the general layout, and I really, really like it. Down below, this is just a power station I'm using temporarily, but this is where your batteries or the power station or whatever your main electrical source sits. This particular one has a spot for a refrigerator in the center. Make note that it has to be a relatively short refrigerator, and to access that you primarily kind of have to reach down from underneath to get things out of there. And in that far corner up there, that is a door for a box that pulls off and exposes a porta potty. Make note here, vertical supports, and there's obviously one that lines just on the other side of that fridge. Make note of that when we go over to 9.0. But this is a general layout. I like it. It's worked pretty well. One more thing, I'm sorry. Above there is a pull-up one single door that pulls up and allows that access to that storage we were talking about in the cab over. Let's go over to the van. I'm going to show you a unfinished cedar interior, but with that Osmo hard wax, so you guys can kind of see the difference. And then we'll roll over to 9.0, and I'll talk about some of the changes I made in that one. Okay, so we're in the van, and the reason I'm in here is to briefly talk about the finish difference between using the unfinished cedar with the water-based poly on there. As a side note, I forgot to mention I use gloss, or using this Osmo hard wax right here. It's like an oil finish, but it also has a wax in it. As a side note, there are a couple variations of this. I use the clear satin. Anyways, but the finish inside of this van is using the Osmo, okay? So as opposed to the poly where it sits on top and forms a film, I guess you would say, this soaks in the wood. Now, I think they both look fine. I think they both look good, but my preference is using the oil rub almost exclusively, even on hardwoods like walnut. In this van, this walnut is finished with a water-based poly. Again, it looks great. It's probably, frankly, a little bit better protected than the hard wax finishes. But as you'll see in 9.0, I finished the walnut with the hard wax. And just, again, my personal preference is I like the look a little bit more. It gives it a little bit more of a flat, natural look. That's all preference, but my point of showing this to you guys is if you wanted to use, if you were kind of up in the air between those two products, or maybe you weren't aware of either of them, you can kind of get a difference. I hope the video captures that. So let's go to 9.0 and we'll chat about that, similarities and differences. Okay, so obviously I have 9.0 off of the truck. I will embed additional imagery to show this curve, but I'm going to talk about it here. So I get it. At face value, you might look at this general shape and you might say they look nothing alike to 8.0, and it is different in some key areas, and obviously the exterior finish is different. But inspirationally, in terms of size and general shape, 8.0 was a direct influence on 9.0. That being a sweeping arc that runs across. It does have a cab over, however, it is primarily intended for storage, not sleeping. Now, some of the differences in the shape that I made of, and this is wide angle so you can capture the whole camper, so it might be a little distorted here, but some of the difference I did make on 9.0 is it's a little wider. The external width is 75.5 inches, and the interior height is 64.5, so, you know, roughly about 3 inches taller. You guys will see that the arc to the rear is a little bit more pronounced, and obviously the arc in the top is slightly taller because it's a little bit taller on top. But most notably was, I don't know what you call this, but instead of having the vertical wall connect directly into the horizontal roof surface, this has a very pronounced 45-degree angle. And that 45-degree angle, this was very challenging to build, but arcs at the same rate, both at the top and the bottom where it meets that vertical wall. I hope that's clear. I think it adds a little bit more to the shape. It lends itself well to using this type of finish, this smooth side walled finish. And I think aerodynamically, based on just the anecdotes of performance of the truck, is this works a little bit better. If I can find a good image, I'll embed one that shows looking at this camper front on, but you guys will notice that those 45-degree edges on the frontal profile actually take out quite a bit of surface area, aerodynamically, I guess you would say, that I think lent to it performing so well. Let's take a look at the interior and some of the differences. All right, so looking in here, this interior probably looks starkly different, and it is. However, there are some similarities, and then we'll go into the differences. So same concept, a north-south bed. This one is also roughly 36 inches wide at its most, but instead of having a straight back and then an angle at the rear, this one angles in the whole plane of the bed to the full width in the rear. And the rationale was it's intended where your head sits up on that side. You probably need most sleeping room in your shoulder region. And it's still not minimal. It's only like 32 inches wide here at the bottom. So that's not crazy. That's not crazy narrow. It's only a 6-inch difference. Also down here, what I did is I created a little bump out here. If you guys see that. And what that does, that bump out is right here reflected in here. So when you're sleeping, it actually gives about 3 or 4 more inches of overall length. This is off the top of my head, but I think the overall sleeping length on this is like 76 inches. Don't quote me on that, but because of this extra little bump out right here. Another difference down here, well, let me explain this angle. So perspective in artistry is this idea that if you're drawing on a flat plane and you want to give something the perception of depth, let's say a road or a set of railroad tracks, is you would actually, in the drawing, you would angle them closer together as they progress, and that gives this perception of additional depth. And I essentially tried to mimic that to a lesser extent here. Now, this side is straight, but this one angles in. But the idea is when you walk up into the door, it gives it perceptually a sense of additional depth. One of the big goals and modifications I wanted to make in this interior over 8.0 was give it a little bit more of a sense of space inside. And I think that angle actually served pretty well. It also had a secondary benefit, which is in this front entryway. So when you step into the camper, this is larger, and I think it just gives it a more free flow. What I also did, though, is if you remember, I made note that there was that vertical column in 8.0. On this one, I built up the bed platform, which is up here, a little bit more hefty, and then I added one angled support into the wall, and that is strong enough, no issues there. But what it gave is when you're looking into the interior here, it gave a far more sense of space because this isn't all clogged up with those vertical columns. The next big difference is as opposed to 8.0 where the fridge sat down here, on this one I put the fridge up on this side. So instead of having a countertop that ran all the way to this wall and a second drawer, which would have been there, I essentially moved the sink over there. It still pulls from the water source here, just like 8.0. And that door there does pull off, but essentially that's just for the plumbing access and that kind of deal. Still a drawer down at the end, but then the fridge sits up here. Now what that did is it allowed me to use a larger fridge and also have the fridge more easily accessible when you're in the camper. Now the downside, of course, is you lose some counter space. However, just like 8.0, I have the secretary desk region here. But instead of having storage up here like 8.0, I put a microwave. Because I have a little bit more height on the interior, that was enough for me to fit a microwave. And I also shrunk down the secretary desk by a few inches. Now you open it up, same area in there, USB ports up there, you still have a light right there. And but the desk surface is a little bit shorter, and because this aisleway was a little bit wider because of the extra width of the camper, I just had the what will be like a desk writing surface, it doesn't fold up like 8.0, because when you pull out 8.0, you can use it in the flat plane or you can fold it over once. And I find folding it over once just kind of tends to work a little better. So a couple changes, but also a lot of things that were of the same inspiration. The drawer is a drawer. This one down here is a little bit bigger. But what I did add on this one was this vertical cubby space here. Now what you see in there, right, is just a jacket I have hung up in there. But this would be good for long vertical objects, say for example, a rifle. I don't know if a fisherman, I'm not a fisherman, but I don't know if maybe like a fisherman had a collapsible pole or one that disassembled, if they would want to store it in their camper. But if they did, you know, that would be a good space for that. Of course, it's good for hanging up shirts or jackets. And that is an addition, a change from 8.0 to 9.0. Sink operates the same way. 8.0 has an oval sink. This one's just a round one. Same faucet, same water source as I discussed. A difference with the door. This is a Dutch door, meaning it can open up in two pieces. And instead of having a window in this door, I put the window, which this is a porthole window, over on this side. Now, the big elephant of the room as far as the differences in here is the dark finish. Now, this is a personal preference. I like both of them. I think they both look nice, that being 8.0 and 9.0. This video doesn't capture how good this is. I have to admit the color is kind of it's hard to describe, but it's not representing the color very good. But I personally really prefer the dark interiors. I know maybe I'm in a minority. I hear of a lot of people who tend to like, you know, bright white ones, but I like this dark feel. And as long as you have good lighting. So in here, I added 8.0 had a single row of 3, and they were technically bigger lights. These are smaller lights, but there is a total of 6 and 2 rows of 3. I like that lighting a little better, and though I like both sides, I think I prefer the little bit of a darker look. And then same floor, the fabric is the same. 8.0 had blue fabric in the roof. This one I used darker color. And of course, all of these wood accents that you see is walnut. And this walnut is coated in the Osmo hard wax, just like the van finish. So you could see that difference, because if you looked at that walnut table in the van, that was finished with the water-based poly, and this is that oil rub finish. Again, I think they both look nice, but I prefer the oil rub finish. And then the final difference in here is I added a full-size max air fan, or standard 14-inch vent fan up here. I think that's a better solution. Kept it a little bit more streamlined, but in the spot where this porthole window was on 8.0, that was a smaller vent fan. It works, it just doesn't work as well. I didn't like disrupting the roof profile, but I went ahead and went with the 14-inch fan on this one. All right, guys, so that's it for the comparison between those two. I hope that was helpful. In the comments, I'm looking for 2 pieces of information. Let me know if it's helpful, of course. But I'm also curious what your guys' preferences are between those 2 campers in both the exterior finish, i.e. the log cabin, or the smooth-sided one, which is the white one, and your guys' preference on the light interior versus the dark interior. I'm just kind of curious as to where you lie. If you guys are curious as to myself, I think I probably prefer the more log cabin look, but I like the darker finish of 9.0. However, I actually like them both equally. So I'd love to see your comments and your thoughts on that. Hope this was helpful. Hope you guys had a good Christmas, and I will have a bunch of videos coming to you soon. Thanks a bunch.